The closing night film of this year's Melbourne Women in Film Festival is a film from New Zealand called Kainga. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to one of the producers of Kainga, Kerry Warkia. Kerry, welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Thank you, Kelda. It's lovely to be here.
Great to talk to you. And I love talking to New Zealand filmmakers and producers and so on, because you really do make some excellent productions, and it's always great to talk about them. So thank you. Now, Kerry, I must ask
you. Oh, great.
you,
well, on behalf of...
Yes, go on. Yeah.
I was just going to say on behalf of New Zealand producers and filmmakers, that's what a pleasure.
Well, it is my pleasure, because I remember seeing Waru and Vai,
Yes.
which I know you were involved with, both of those as producer, and now Kainga, which is about 8 stories about Asian filmmakers and people from the Asian community trying to settle into New Zealand over about a 50-year period and so on, different stories. Tell me about the genesis of this production and how you were involved with it.
Yeah, so as you know, Kyle McNaughton, who's one of the other producers, and myself produced Waru, produced Vai, and kind of created that framework. It was an intention for us right from the beginning to create a platform, I guess, for underrepresented filmmakers, and specifically female filmmakers, Indigenous, Pacific and Pan-Asian, to have a voice and to work together as a collective, because that amplified their voices, rather than, short films are wonderful and such a great medium, but we wanted to do something that was more in line with a Indigenous way of collaborative filmmaking, and help people to be able to tell stories about, some tough subjects that they're tackling, and be able to do that as a collective and stand together. And so we made those 2 films, and of course the next set of underrepresented voices in New Zealand is Pan-Asian women in terms of filmmakers, and so we really wanted that to be the 3rd chapter, which was Kainga. And so the other producer that we brought on board, her name is Shuchi Kotari, who's a filmmaker herself, a writer, a lecturer at university, and it was just fabulous to work with her. And we had 11 women altogether, because we had 3 teams of writer-directors, and then we had 5 women who wrote and directed their own pieces. And we really wanted to have a spectrum of Pan-Asia and represent that as much as we could in the selection of stories and the selection of filmmakers for Kainga. So that's kind of how the genesis of that came about, because I think for Pan-Asian women, we wanted to address the topic of being an immigrant, being in another land and making home in that land, and what that looks like.
Well, thanks for that description, because it's very effective, and these stories are really so interesting, and with so many different cultures represented. Tell me about finding the talent, if you like to put it that way, to make the film, to write and make the films, and to make sure that you had that diversity of stories in the final product.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we did with Waru and Vai, we followed suit with Kainga, which was that we have a set of creative, I guess they're creative restrictions that we set around how we're going to make the film. And some of that is to do with budget, the low budget nature of the project, but also there are some creative restrictions as well. And we set that up on a website, and we have questions that we ask, and we basically send that out for anyone to log on to that and apply. Basically just kind of let us know that they're there, and everybody gets an interview, because to us it was really important to not rule people out if it was their first time making a film. It was more about the voice and what they really wanted to say or contribute to the production, to the stories, to each other, bring to the table. And for us, that was, we felt that was really important. And so while we basically ask for expressions of interest, if people are interested in this and want to try this, and then we do interviews, and we interview everyone. And then really it's a matter of, and every single one of them are incredible people. And then it's just a matter of trying to make sure that the team that we're bringing together give and receive from each other. They're all bringing something that's different. They're all able to receive something. They're all at different levels of their career path, different ages, different stages of their life journey. And just making sure that they're going to gel together as a cohesive to tell the story as collaborators.
How very interesting. And as I said, there were 8 stories. They're very tight, roughly about 10 minutes each or thereabouts. And I was interested to see how political any of them would get, and how negative or good experiences, whatever. It's an interesting, diverse range of commentary in many respects about living in New Zealand from another culture.
Yeah, that's right. And it is quite diverse. And I think they have tackled things in such a generous way, and also really, really interrogated the stories they want to tell and what they want to talk about. They didn't shy away from things that were difficult. They leaned into them, I felt. And I certainly think that I certainly agree with you that we do have a real diverse range. And for some people, it isn't paradise, and for some it is. And for some it might be, but it's complicated. It still has its layers of, complication within making that home. And of course, you have to navigate the Indigenous people that are there. You have to navigate the politics of the treaty in New Zealand. You have to, there's all sorts of things. And I guess being immigrants and who were there first, and how does that also, where do you fit inside that? And then people who have wonderful experiences, we really wanted a spectrum.
You certainly have that. And apart from the writing and direction, and I found that so interesting, is getting the right actors to participate in each of the films. And I can imagine that in itself would have been a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of community casting, a lot of, writers and directors reaching out to their own communities that they're a part of, as well as the casting agent trying to do their best to reach out. And, it's not like we have this incredible pool of Pan-Asian actors who speak Farsi and Tagalog and, Marathi. And so it is, really important that the directors, in the same way that the Waru writers and directors did and the Vai writers and directors did, they reached into their communities. And I think that's, there's a lot of very first time actors on the screen through all of those films, and they really do a phenomenal job because the stories are so because they understand them, because while the stories are so personal to each of the writers and directors, they're also, the actors have to be of the ethnicity of whoever the writer is. And I think there's a shorthand in that. There's a communal experience, even if it's not exactly the same, they understand it. And so when they have to step in and portray that, they're doing that from a place of truth. And that makes the performances so wonderful, in my opinion.
Certainly does. It does have that very strong feel about it, and very effective it is too. I'm wondering, once you saw each of the final films, you as producer, Kerry, how was your involvement in putting those films together, in giving advice, in tweaking, I suppose, each of these short films to make sure it all fits into the general scheme of things, I suppose?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is that we have it's a 10-minute one shot. That's one of our creative restrictions. Each of the writer directors gets 1 day to shoot, and they shoot a 10-minute one shot. So really, once we walk away from the from principal photography, everyone is essentially just choosing their take. And with some of the films, there might be some splices in there where they've gone, I really like the performance in this take up to this point, and then I'd like to, so that we're presenting it as a 10-minute one shot, even if we're putting an invisible cut in there. And so in terms of the producers working to help shape the films, yes, that's, I mean, what the writers have written on the page, we've worked with them right up to when we shoot it. We've worked with them, they're doing their one take. And then we go into the edit, and yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're right there for them if they need us, but we're also right there for them because we have to maintain and think about the production as a whole and the film as a whole, not just as an individual vignette. And so that's, I think, where we come in and help to guide and shape that process, so that the films remain part of a whole rather than be too much outside that. But I would say that that's done in script, that's done on the day that we're shooting, that's done, nobody is kind of going way off base.
No, fair enough. And I also like the music that's been put into the film, etc., and that in itself heightens, I suppose, some of the scenes quite well.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, composition is just one of my favorite parts of filmmaking, certainly in post-production. I mean, I love all of post-production, I should say that, because they are incredible. The film goes through these different stages and we pass it into post, and they do such an incredible amount of work and pour a whole heap of talent and love and, hard hours into getting the films ready, whether that's grade or sound or VFX but certainly composing and music is such a beautiful process for any film that we've made, and even any series that we've made. And Lauren King is the composer for Waru, Vai and Kainga. She's done all 3 films. She's worked with 29 women, and she is just such a talent, such a star, and brought something beautiful and new to every film, and really leaned into the cultural aspects of each of those films, leaned into the different range of instruments that were required, and she just did such a beautiful job to enhance everything that was already there, rather than try and stifle it or put something else on top of it, so that it's such an important job. And she nailed it every time.
Absolutely. No, it sounded great. I was intrigued by one of the stories, which seemed to be set around the time of that awful terrorist event that happened in New Zealand. And I was wondering where that was going to go, because that could have been quite an angry or whatever response. And yet it goes in somewhat different directions. Tell me about the decisions behind that particular short story.
Yeah, so Hash is the writer-director of that film, and she really knew from the beginning that she wanted to set it during the Christchurch mosque attack, because it brings out, I think, the fear that when something, when you're an immigrant in a country, no matter how long you've been in that country, not everyone sees you as someone who belongs in that space and who has the right to be in that space. And I think that showed us that New Zealand is no different. We're kind of at the bottom of the world, and we feel like maybe the great distance and the fact that, we're 2 islands separates us or keeps us away from, but it doesn't. And I think setting it at that time was really important, both in the creative journey of the film and in the emotional journey of the film. Setting it, just before the end was really important to, I think, just remind us that there are immigrants who still feel unsafe and who still feel different. And that's something that we shouldn't forget, because when we forget it and become complacent, the seeds, like, you know, what happened with this man, and his racism and his rage, and, you know, how he unleashed that on innocent people, that can happen if we're not careful, if we're not cognizant, if we don't look to the past, so that we can walk together into the future. But she did center that actually around something that was personal to her, but also just personal to the character in the story, and have that to elevate what it is that she was talking about in that story, right? Which was the death of this woman who's come back to dig up this treasure, and it's listening to the sound of her sister, who, you know, took her own life years before, specifically because of that, because of feeling like you don't belong.
Yes, how very interesting that story. But I mean, all the stories are great. But yeah, that was really interesting. And just a quick comment about casting. It was great to see. I think it was in the first story, Rena Owen. I mean, she is such a mainstay of New Zealand cinema.
She absolutely is. I mean, she's such an icon of film in New Zealand and you know, internationally. And she was so generous. She literally flew in LA, was in quarantine, did a read through in quarantine, came out, did a rehearsal day, and then we shot the next day. And she was just so generous. And you know, the 10-minute one takes, and brand new young actress, well, both of the actors she was working with were both brand new, and she was really it was just so generous of her to support this film and support these upcoming filmmakers and writers.
Yes. Absolutely terrific stuff. Now, I know the film is screening on Monday night at the Melbourne Women in Film Festival as the closing night film, but I think Kainga has screened elsewhere, and I assume it will also screen somewhere else in terms of distribution and so on.
Yeah, so we this is our second time in Melbourne. So we had our international premiere at MIFF, which was fantastic last year. We've screened at the NZIFF. We were screened in Hawaii for our North American premiere, and it won the Best Feature Film NetPAC Award in Hawaii. And it's gone on to screen in Goa in India for our Asian premiere, and it continues to do the festival round, which is really exciting. And we have picked up some international distribution, so we're hoping to, you know, get it out to lots of other places and make that it gets as wide an audience as possible. Great.
That would be terrific. I mean, just like Waru and Vai, this is an excellent third part of the trilogy, so to speak, Kainga. So I certainly urge everyone listening to this interview to go and see the film, especially when it's then released. Kerry, I must ask you, you're involved in so many different productions. I know you're also an actress. And I read that you're involved in things like Auckland Days and Princess of Chaos, which is a film from last year, other television programs. How do you decide what to get involved with?
Well, Peter, I mean, you flatter me. I haven't been an actress for a long time, but that is what I study. But I'm certainly a full-time career producer these days. Yep. Look, I think, you know, our company, Brown Sugar Apple Grant, we have a real focus on Māori voices, on Pacific voices, on underrepresented voices, you know, which includes Pan-Asian, and on women, and on uplifting stories from the South Pacific. That's our focus. And so when I look at different projects that I want to be involved in, for me, I love, I mean, I think Waru, Vai and Kainga are such beautiful stories, and certainly we're tackling important subjects, but I also love comedies. I love horrors. I love action. I love the entertainment factor as well, and kind of taking all the all the vitamins and putting them in with the ice cream. I love entertainment in that way. And so for me, the stories are just, it's a unique voice. We're saying something unique with the project, and it comes from the South Pacific with a diverse and inclusive cast on the screen and off it. Those are kind of the pillars for me. I want to tell stories that will stick around for a long time, will open up perspectives, that my children can watch and feel like they see themselves and they see their communities. That's kind of what's important to me. And I'm genre agnostic and love a whole heap of, I love this industry. I love what we do, and I love going to the movies and watching everything I can possibly get my hands on.
Okay. I must say I was intrigued by the title, Find Me a Maori Bride, that you were involved in as producer.
Yeah, that's a mockumentary comedy. It is scripted. It's sort of and it is about these two urban Māori men who basically have been given a challenge by their grandmother who's passed away, that they didn't know. They never knew her, but she is very, very wealthy, and she is leaving her fortune to them. But before that happens, they have to reconnect with their culture. And she specifically says she wants them to find themselves a Māori bride. Now, of course, that's kind of, that bit is a throwaway piece, but what they do is they start to learn about their culture. And so it is this kind of trying to reconnect with who you are and possibly what you've lost as an urban Indigenous person, and the fun of all of that. And we needed a good hook and a trope from Grandma to get them to get them going.
Well, how interesting. That's really fascinating stuff. Really great to hear. And tell me, Kerry, are you working on something else at the moment?
Yeah, I have a number of projects in development at the moment, some with international partners and some with local partners. And hoping, at the moment I'm in quite a deep development stage on a lot of those projects, but hoping to finance. And it's always the dance, trying to when it rains it pours, and you get all your projects financed at the same time, and then you have to figure out how to manage that, or you're in development and every single writer needs work. So it's it's kind of it's always interesting.
I can imagine it would be, but I get a strong impression that the New Zealand film industry and the various funding bodies and groups, etc., are very keen for New Zealand stories to be made, and to encourage producers and filmmakers to make these productions, which sounds like it's a very strong film community in New Zealand.
Yeah, absolutely. New Zealand is, we're a nation of 5 million, team 5 million. So it is a very tight community. It's a community that knows each other well, and that comes with its pros and cons, I would say. But I also think that all our funding bodies have a mandate. They are cultural funding bodies, so their mandate is to make sure that New Zealand stories are the stories that are getting financed and getting made. And of course, everybody wants a view to make sure that those stories travel as wide as possible and go international as wide as possible. And so, that's always the balance, making something that is specific to us, but something that can also be universal.
Excellent news to hear. And just my last question, Kerry, I love asking all filmmakers or producers, etc., I talk to. Have you seen, apart from everything else that you've been involved with, have you seen anything else of late, film, television production, whatever, that has impressed you?
Yes. Look, I think Everything Everywhere All at Once was a stroke of genius. I mean, that could have gone so wrong and it went so well. I really loved that film. That was just so great. And I'm just trying to think. I'm watching a couple of series at the moment. The Last of Us is a brilliant series at the moment that I've been binging or watching every episode that comes out. Really been enjoying that. So yeah, I can't, off the top of my head right now, I'm trying to think of anything else, but those are the two things that have stuck with me so far. Yeah. Fine. I do love big blockbuster movies, popcorn movies too.
Why not? That sounds like a great list. Thank you so much. We've been speaking to Kerry Warkia, who is the producer of Kainga, that is screening here in Melbourne at the Melbourne Women in Film Festival closing night, and then look out for it in other destinations. Kerry, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time, Peter. Tēnā.
All the best. Bye-bye.